Possible 211 in progress. Friday, June 28th, 1997, 9:17 a.m. Bank of America, 6600 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. We are large men anyway, but 60 pounds of gear would slow down anyone. We trek slowly up the handicapped ramp to the doors of the institution. Together we push the doors open. A whiff of AC on this warm morning does a fellow good. A bit of air, especially with military-grade body armor and extra steel plates over my vital organs. 40 pounds of armor and 20 pounds of ammunition and weaponry. We may not know it, but my partner and I will change the world of policing forever. St. Michael the Archangel, the patron saint of law enforcement. Defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. Amen. Above was a real event that shocked the world in the latter half of a Los Angeles June. The Battle of North Hollywood was a staggering event that acted as the catalyst for one of the final and biggest waves of police militarization in the United States. Today we will cover a succinct overview of the Battle of North Hollywood, a brief history of the militarization of police, and then we will analyze a number of events, pros and cons if you will. Armed with a number of rifles illegally modified to fire fully automatic and filled with 1,100 armor-piercing rounds imported from the ex-Soviet Union, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Mazzarano far outmatched the police when it came to the realm of firepower. That coupled with extensive armor, it seemed as though these men were unstoppable, and truly, in essence, they were. At 9:17, the two men pulled into a parking space at the north side of the bank and entered the bank. Two officers happened to be passing by when they spotted two juggernaut-esque figures strolling up to the doors of the Bank of America sporting AK-47 rifles. They radioed in a, quote, possible 211 in progress. At 9:24, the suspects exit the building and from the north and south entrance. Both seeing the swath of policemen in front of them, they begin firing their rifles in a sweeping motion. The armor-piercing rounds ripping through police cars and other means of cover like paper towels. Officers and civilians dive for cover as the suspects fire without regard across the street at officers and into the parking lot of a shopping center across the way. Bullet holes are later found in businesses, homes, everywhere. Officer James Zaboravan was at Phillips 7 and he seized his opportunity to take the suspect down. He took aim with his standard issue 12-gauge shotgun and fired at his back, and when Phillips was hit, he merely stumbled and then slowly turned around. Imagine, if you will, the fear he must have felt in his heart when the man that he just tagged in the back with a 12-gauge shotgun, the strongest gun that he had been given, merely stumbled and turns to meet him with an AK-47 filled with armor-piercing rounds and death in his eyes. Phillips unleashed the fires of hell on Zaboravan, who bravely dived to shield two unarmored officers with his bulletproof vest, likely saving their lives and sustaining a heavy gunshot wound in the process. That is just one of the many reasons that this day, among other things, is known as the day that willpower beat firepower. They're able to get in the cover of a nearby dentist's office where the dentist does his best to tend to the wounded officer. On a side note, that dentist still practices at that location to this day, now called bulletproof dentistry. At 9:31, the two suspects move north to where their getaway vehicle is parked. The two men continue shooting for a few minutes until Mazzarano gets in the vehicle and Phillips retrieves another assault rifle from the trunk and continues to fire at anything that could even vaguely resemble a living thing. At some point in this exchange, Phillips is shot in the hand and basically has it pulverized, and he now has to use his forearm as a support in order to continue firing. Other than Bismarck-esque lucky shots, the officers' weapons are completely useless. Their range is not long enough and they're too inaccurate. It was even bad enough that they were forced to go to a local gun store and beg the owner to lend them something to even the playing field. Finally, at 9:42, LA SWAT officers arrive. Mazzarano slowly drives the vehicle up the street while Phillips walks alongside using the vehicle as cover. At 9:53, for reasons unknown, the suspects split from one another. They turn east on Archwood Street, and Mazzarano continues down the street while Phillips takes cover behind a big rig. Phillips' rifle jams, and unable to clear the simple blockage due to his injured hands, he drops the rifle and draws his Beretta pistol. After exchanging a few more rounds with officers, he is shot once more, dropping the pistol. He picks it back up, but this time he aims it at his chin towards his brain. He is killed instantly, along with another lucky shot that went between his armor and severed his spine simultaneously. At the time around Phillips' death, SWAT officers are closing in on the other men, now finally with some firepower to rival that of their opponent. After his vehicle is rendered useless, Mazzarano attempts to steal passing vehicles as a secondary getaway. He gets into a truck that was vacated by a terrified driver who fled immediately, only to realize that the keys were no longer in the vehicle. Utilizing the stall in the firefight, a patrol car sped up to their combatant and forced him back behind the original escape car as cover. The officers dropped to the ground and utilized Mazzarano's personal choice not to armor his limbs to their advantage and shot him 29 times, blowing out his legs. At 10:01 a.m., Mazzarano finally surrenders to the officers, saying, "Why don't you just put a bullet in my head?" He bled out on the scene, unable to receive medical treatment. By a miracle, there was no one killed that day other than the two suspects, but there were numerous close calls and 20 overall casualties, 12 officers and 8 civilians. Call it what you'd like, but I believe that it was nothing short of the grace of God that not one man, woman, or child lost their life that day, because Lord knows that they could have. It was this event that sparked one of the final waves of police militarization in the United States, in that this was not the first event that triggered some form of weapons upgrade for the police. During Prohibition, there was a massive crime wave sweeping the nation, and with that came, interestingly enough, the militarization of criminals. Weapons such as the Thompson submachine gun and the Browning automatic rifle being prime examples. In response, police began to be issued weapons of a higher caliber in order to combat the use of bulletproof vests, and of course the weapons of choice at the time for criminals. Fast forward a few decades, we see the Rottweilers, or the long hot summer of 1967, like there in Detroit, as well as further militarization of organized crime factions, thank you partly to the beginning of the war on drugs. Finally, the North Hollywood sister event, the 1986 FBI Miami shootout, saw another wave of increased police armament, in which the police's standard-issue .38 caliber revolver was not shown to be effective enough with regards to stopping power, and was subsequently replaced with a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. And of course, the aforementioned battle in North Hollywood saw one of the final waves of police militarization, specifically the revolution of the 1033 program. Enacted in 1996, the U.S. Department of Defense, the 1033 program permits the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America to transfer excess Department of Defense supplies and equipment to law enforcement agencies across the country for use in performing their law enforcement duties. The aforementioned June 28th morning only accelerated the program. From 2010 to 2020, there had been a total transfer of $1.7 billion of equipment surplus transferred from the Department of Defense to law enforcement agencies across the nation. Primarily weapons such as high-powered rifles or pistols and armored vehicles, but also items as mundane as a popcorn machine and a few $4 dustpans. The 1033 program and similar legislation following events such as the 1986 Miami shootout, the 1984 San Ysidro McDonald's massacre, and the 1997 North Hollywood shootout have been the framework of the United States police militarization, but how has it affected the country at large? There is extensive debate on the overall effect. According to Emerald.com, quote, "The impact of police militarization is similarly unclear. Some scholars suggest that it has a negative impact on policing because it creates community hostility and encourages police to see force as a central problem-solving tool. However, other scholars suggest militarization is a positive development as it can promote professionalism and accountability. To date, there is little empirical work on the impact of militarization on policing that could inform this debate." Close quote. From what I can tell, there have been a number of instances that have justified an upgrade or two on the weapons available to police. A number of them have been mentioned earlier in this speech. However, there have also been a number of incidences that have been cited to show a number of drawbacks of a militarized police force. Notable among them is the MOVE bombing, in which an armored standoff with police in Philadelphia led to a building being bombed out with water gel explosives. The resulting explosions caused a fire that destroyed 65 nearby houses, killed 11 people, including 5 children aged 7 to 13, and left 250 people in that community homeless. A survivor states that officers were firing on those who attempted to escape. Other events were the standoff at Ruby Ridge that led to the death of 2 of the sons of the Weaver family after a number of government agencies armed with sniper rifles and M16 rifles laid siege to the house for days, as well as the siege at Waco, Texas. FBI and BATFE agents used armored vehicles and tanks and attack helicopters during the siege of the Branch Davidian community in Waco, Texas, including 50 caliber machine guns. The FBI also launched 40mm CS grenade fire from M79 grenade launchers and fired 2 military M651 rounds at the Branch Davidian site. The Army Tech Manuals for the M651 round warns that it can penetrate 3/4 inch plywood at 200 meters, and the projectile may explode upon target impact. The fire that was later started by either of the sides, which has never been determined, killed 76 people, including 25 children and 2 pregnant women. Police militarization is a complex issue with no true catch-all solution. How much firepower do we allow law enforcement in order to stop events such as San Ysidro, North Hollywood, Miami? By extension, does the increase in firepower naturally lead to tragedies such as the MOVE or Waco, Texas? Police militarization is a movement that has been strong through the 20th and 21st centuries with a number of events to justify it. But how much is too much? Where do we draw the line? That is a question with no clear answer. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. Amen.